Welcome to the Graybeard Chronicles podcast. Your hosts, Brian Halstead and Kevin Harkins, are two gray-bearded patriots who love God, their family and friends, and their country. The Graybeards are here to inspire, inform, and educate you on a myriad of topics they are passionate about. Brian and Kevin have a strong desire to share this with you to help you live your best life. Sit back and enjoy this amazing podcast as the Graybeards pass along the wisdom of the ages.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Graybeard Chronicles. I'm Brian Halstead.
And I'm Kevin Harkins.
And Kevin, we're here to pass along some wisdom of the ages. What the heck does that mean?
We're not perfect, but we do have gray beards. And that means we've got some significant life experience, some life lessons, and some perspectives that are worthy of passing along.
Well, I think that sums it up nicely. Let's get to it. Kevin, good evening, sir. I tell you what, man, it's an exciting night. We're doing things a little bit different. We're not going to jump right into our normal banter because we have the privilege of having a guest here tonight. And so let's introduce our guest, and then we can start some banter back and forth. We have the good fortune of having Gramps Jeffrey with us here tonight. And Gramps is the father of 4 children and grandfather to 6. And he, in his post-retired life, I guess is a good way to say it, has written a children's book. And this children's book is something we're going to talk about tonight and kind of the motivation behind it and so on. So before we go into that a little bit further, just wanted to say welcome, Gramps. Appreciate you being here.
Hey, I appreciate you inviting me. I don't have a gray beard, but I think we're all about the same age.
Yeah, we won't compare IDs to verify that, but yeah, great to have you here, man. So Kevin, like I said, we're not doing our normal banter back and forth, but it is nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
It's always fun to have these recording sessions on Monday nights, and it's kind of cool to get somebody to come in here. We've had some folks talk about books here recently, but you, sir, are the first author of a children's book on this podcast. So you can hang that out as a part of your qualification.
Well, thank you. You know, the reason that I wrote this children's book is living this past year because of the pandemic caused by COVID-19 in isolation, except for being able to be with my family. It gave me special time to watch and interact with these grandkids. And I got to tell you, what a trip they are. All 6 of these kids, have different personalities, but the one thing they have in common is the sense of curiosity and how they accomplish things. So how they grow year to year is all part of the story, but also part of the story is, what happened when we were 3 years old? How is 3 years old different today than when you and I were growing up?
Yeah, I read a story today. One of my friends on Facebook, Marine brother, shared a story of one of our folks that we served with that's no longer with us. He was killed in a car accident years ago, but there was some conversation back and forth about things that had happened when we were serving together when we were like 18 or 19. And I was reading the summary of this like I'd never experienced it. So I don't remember when I was 3 if I don't remember when I was 18. That's my point. But yeah, no, it's the world's different, man. No doubt. The world is different, today than it was 10 years ago, much less when we were 3.
Oh yeah, as a baby boomer trying to understand how this world has evolved since I was 3 years old, is kind of like, my parents didn't have cell phones. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have cable TV. They didn't have remotes. I was my dad's remote. He'd say, "Son, go change the channel." I was the remote back then. So, it's a different world. And is it better? Well, I'll let your listeners kind of answer that. Is it better today than when we were growing up?
Is it ever better? It's certainly different. Gramps, yeah, it's an honor to talk to you. Thanks for being here. I did have a couple questions right out of the blocks that I would like to ask you to address. First of all, I don't really know the world of children's books very much, but the little bit that I do know, and I mean that, which is only anecdotally, there's not a lot of older gentlemen who are writing children's books. So that's thing number one, is what inspired you to do it. And then thing number 2, and Brian and I were actually talking about this before we came on the air today, and that was both of us have read the children's book, and it certainly is captivating your attention. But what I remember from my 3-year-old days and my own personal family and the reality that I lived is the outcome would have been very different in my, it wouldn't have been handled the way that you have that carried out in the book. And if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, there's no problem because you're right. The discipline's a little bit different today than it was when we were growing up.
Right.
But the theme of the book is, at what age do we take responsibility? Is it 3 years old? Is it 13 years old? Is it 23 years old? I mean, I got plenty of my contemporaries at 63 years old that still don't take responsibility for what they do. So that's really the theme of the book. What goes through a toddler's mind that parents are so desperate to understand. When does a toddler really understand the difference between me and us? So, that's what this whole book explores. And the reason I wrote it was, at our age, we're the grandparents. We get a chance to kind of observe. We don't have to live with these kids day in, day out. And so it gave me a chance really to see how this whole interaction was. And that was my motivation, was to put this on paper, because what happened in my family happens in every single family around the world. The kids have to learn how to share. They have to learn how to get along. So that really was the motivation of writing this book.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I love the theme of responsibility and taking responsibility for your actions, being accountable, and certainly a good theme there. There's not enough of that going around in the world today.
I don't
Yeah,
think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Gramps.
No, I was going to say that we've got to step in there today to do that. This is the greatest generation this country has ever produced. There's no doubt in my mind. These kids from 1 to 10 years old, they are going to change this country. And they're the first generation that has grown up completely on the internet. I mean, as soon as they're born, they hear about the internet. They get on phones. They get on their tablets. There's not been a generation that's had this completely like it is. So it's up to us as older adults to help balance that out, to help bring them back to the real world and teach them things that they're not learning on the internet. And so that's part of our responsibility as grandparents, is we got to jump back in.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that we've talked about on our podcast several times is this idea that, especially in America, but also probably worldwide, there's a real, worship of youth that we just, everybody who is, that's an overstatement, but the young, the strong, the fast, the sexy, the cool, all of that stuff tends to be sort of wrapped up in this. If you're not young and beautiful and strong, then you're beyond your years, and you just need to sort of be put out to pasture. And the wisdom that comes with age and experience couldn't be more helpful to many people if they'd sit down and slow down and just listen to it. But that's hard to do. And you're right. Grandparents are probably one of the single best ways to incorporate that life learning back into a child's life.
Well, when you think about it, as we get older, as decades turn into the next decade, turns into the next decade, we have a lot more failures. And so as we get these failures, we're learning from them. So that's where our smarts come from. That's where our wisdom comes from, is as we get older, we fail a lot more. So we've got to be able just to take that and give that to the kids today. So that's the one thing they're missing. When I was growing up, it's a lot different than it is today. I mean, I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My uncle lived up the street. My grandmother lived a couple blocks away. And so we had a whole family unit that was helping us raise our kids. But in today's world, we're scattered all over the place. Using me as an example, I've got 2 of my grandkids here in Scottsdale, Arizona, but I've got 2 more in Austin, Texas, and I got 2 more in Orlando, Florida. We're all over the place. So the kids don't have that same opportunity to have this village of elders and cousins and so forth to raise them as they once did. So that's one of the reasons we have to step into.
Yeah, agreed. And there's statistics out there about the percentage of success and health and well-being of children as they grow up when their grandparents are directly involved in their lives. I think that's certainly an important thing. And one of the things that my wife and I are concentrating on doing with ours, and at the same time, there's got to be a balance there, right? And you might have alluded to it earlier when you're talking about, they're not your kids, and you gotta kind of know your boundaries, if you will. And grandparents joke about, yeah, you can spoil them, and then you get to send them home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and sometimes they show their asses while they're at your house, and you have to kind of be patient and stand back and give your children a chance to deal with their children, because you've had to do it, you've had to earn your stripes, and it can be challenging. So while involvement is good, there needs to be a balance there, and you got to make sure you don't cross that line, if that makes sense.
Well, the pandemic has really screwed this whole thing up. When you think about it, normal life, normal education. Our kids, the pandemic has caused our kids to read so much less. According to the United Nations Educational Science and Culture Organization, I think they call it UNESCO. There are 584 million children worldwide that are now experiencing reading difficulties. Now, you compare that to before the pandemic, there were 460 million kids, still a lot of kids. But, that's a 20% increase of kids worldwide that really are having reading problems now that they didn't have because of this pandemic. That wipes out 2 decades of educational gains around the world. Stanford Graduate School of Education reports now that second and third year old graders reading fluency is 30% behind of what it was before the pandemic. So if you figure in that we've all been stuck in this pandemic, that's another reason we have just got to throw ourselves in and get these kids back to where they should be.
And that's interesting to me. I didn't, I don't have any, I don't have a grandchild yet either, but so I'm not really kind of in that young child zone personally right now. But why is it that reading has gone down? I part of me thinks you got more time at home, you probably read more, but you're saying, is it just because of the lack of teaching of reading, writing, arithmetic in the classroom because kids aren't in the classroom? That's what's causing this deficit in education?
Oh yeah, that's the main reason. In other words, they get their best education by going to school, by being with their peers, by being with teachers, and a lot of teachers. It takes a village to raise a kid, and the village is not only the mom and the dad and the aunts and the uncles and the grandparents. It's the teachers. It's the peers. And because they've gone through close to 2 years of not having this, that's why they're running behind.
This is kind of a sidebar, but I got to ask this question though. What do you think about homeschooling? There's been an uptick in homeschooling to try to fill the need and give kids a good education that obviously many parents think they're not getting. And so is that a viable solution in your mind?
Well, my only concern with homeschooling is you have 1 or 2 people that are involved in these kids' lives. Again, when you send them to a school, you have several adults involved in their lives, and they have different aspects, and they have different teachings and so forth. If there's one thing that we should really get out of us talking together, is it's necessary to teach children how to think, not what to think, but how they should think. Okay, and so we all need to be teaching them how to think. And the way they're going to learn that is by interaction with a lot of adults. And so that's why I think everybody should be going to school, because it's just more of an exposure of more different points of view, because that way the kid can figure out how to think. And then they'll learn what to think over time.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think that's a great point. I think we do need to develop their ability to think and work out scenarios and so on. And we shouldn't be in the business of telling them what to think in all subject matters. I think there are some that fall into that category that you would tell them, this is the way it's to be done. And, this is where you need to take a stand on certain things. I mean, we're talking very serious subject matter. Thou shalt not kill and things like that.
Values and culture, right, stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, again, that's one of the reasons why we, I'm talking as grandparents, but parents also, have got to make the time to read books to these kids. When they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, You've got to get them into the habit of reading books so that they can expand their mind, so they can learn how to think. If you take a kid 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, the reason you should be reading a book with them is, if you get a kid sitting on your lap and you're reading a book, that creates some bonding. Okay, again, with your kids being all over the country, you need as much bonding time as you can with these kids. So reading a book to them creates bonding. It also creates and supports listening skills. Now, you and I, with our gray beards, know that listening skills is the best skill that we can have, because listening skills help us with being able to communicate, teach people, sell things. So listening skills, if we can get that into the mind of these little kids when they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, by sitting down in a routine and reading them books, that's going to help them in the long run. You've got to reading them books helps with the cognitive and language development. There's the word in the book that they don't understand. Well, explain it to them. It gives you a chance to sit there and explain it to them. Not like they're just watching the internet or TV and it just comes at them. You can actually sit there and explain things to them. So we've got to be reading them books. And then finally, the attention span. You got them in your lap for 20 minutes. These little kids, they bounce off the walls when they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. You got them there for 20 minutes. It helps with their attention span. And you and I both know we have to have attention span as we're growing older. Otherwise, we'll be bouncing off the walls. So that's why we've got to be reading these kids' children's books.
Yeah, that is good quality time. I got to call you out on the whole graybeard thing, though, because I'm looking at the screen here, and it looks like to me you scared yours away with the razor.
Yeah, I did. Right before we started talking today.
All right, because it's not real visible to me.
Yeah.
All right.
Gramps, you said something several minutes ago that kind of caught my attention. I'd like to ask you about it. You said that these, I think you said 1 to 10 years old, this is the greatest generation or something like that. What did you mean by that? What do you mean that these are the greatest generation?
They are exposed to information as soon as they come out of the womb. I mean, even probably within the womb. They're exposed to iPhones and cell phones, and they're exposed to the internet, and they're exposed to all of these screens that we had no idea when we were growing up.
Right.
That's the kind of education we didn't get till we were many, many years later. So they've got the information. Now we have to mold it with them so that they do become the greatest. They're going to be the most curious generation because there's so many questions about everything that's going on. And so that's why I think this newest generation is going to lead us and lead this country into the best it's ever been.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah, they're certainly, I think they have greater capability because of what they're exposed to and the tools that they have immediate access to. I would absolutely agree with that.
okay. I'm just wondering, is access to information always a good thing? I mean, there's access to good information,
Right.
and there's access to bad information.
Yeah, is it education or distraction?
Right.
Could be both.
Or harmful.
Right.
I mean, there's all kind of things that are harmful about information if you've given it at the wrong age to the wrong people in the wrong way. And so I think that whole idea is particularly involvement with adults who have learned lessons over life and can guide and shape. I don't think we should give all information to all kids just so they can be exposed to it. I don't think that's healthy.
Now, the other thing, these kids, it's got to be segmented. In other words, they still got to go out and play baseball. They still got to go out and run, and kick the ball, and things like that. We still got to get them outside.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be a balancing act. So it's up to the parents to make sure that happens. But again, now they're exposed to more than we were ever exposed to.
You bet. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt. What's interesting though is I'm not sitting around thinking that I missed out on anything.
Right.
That's all about perspective because I think about my childhood in a fond way and had great times, and yeah, we didn't have access to all that stuff, and I wonder how my life might be different if we had, because I like it just the way it is today.
Yeah.
And all the experience I had along the way. But I guess that's just that's all in part of your experience and your journey in this life when you happen to engage and are created.
Very good. And how's the book doing, Gramps? I know it's how long ago did you publish it, and how's it doing?
I published it over this summer, and it seems to be doing well. I don't want to turn 3. I'm working on the next one. Is I don't want to turn 4.
Okay.
My granddaughter Olivia just turned 9, and she came to me last week. She says, "I got a great idea for a book. I don't want to turn 10." I said, "Why? Oh, yeah, what are you? Why don't you want to turn 10?" She says, "Well, I got to start worrying." About driving. I said, that's another 7 years away. Why are you worrying about driving now that you're 9 years old? She says, oh, I'm worried about it. She said, I got to go pick out a college. And I said, that's another 9 years away. Why are you worried about that? So it just reinforces that at every age, there's a reason we may not want to get older.
Yeah, I think there's a message in that though, because why are they worried about that stuff, right? Why are kids worried about what's happening, 10 years from now when they should be enjoying the here and now? Maybe we need to refocus what we're teaching and help them to understand the importance of mindfulness and enjoying what you're doing right now. Why are you even worried about where? I mean, it's important to plan, don't get me wrong. And at the same time, if it's causing you to get derailed and not enjoy your experience now, I think we ought to check ourselves, maybe send a different message.
Yeah, that's true. We may be giving them too much information.
Yeah. We didn't, obviously, none of us had access to the internet, and I spent my entire, of course, I was,
Well, Al Gore hadn't invented it yet, so, we had to.
That's funny. I spent my whole childhood outside. I mean, I was rarely indoors during my childhood, and I think you're right, Gramps. That's something that seems to have changed because people are so busy in their electronic boxes. Whether it's on their TV with their PlayStation or they're on their phone or on their iPad or whatever it is, they're not out, experiencing life and playing baseball and kicking the soccer ball and doing all those kind of things that I think are really healthy for kids. And that's another thing that we should and could push kids toward for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we got to keep in mind that technology is there to help us achieve our goals, not to make the goals or establish the goals.
Yeah.
It's there to help us.
That's
So we got to make sure that, we're just using it. It's not using us.
Yeah. Amen to that. You said some interesting things about reading to kids in those early ages, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. I mean, that's an important time in their lives. And I think it's more important than what people realize that, as adults, we're walking around and we have a lot of thoughts, we have a lot of behaviors that are rooted in that time frame in our life. So, as parents and grandparents, don't underestimate the importance of the interaction that you have with kids that young, because it's going to stick with them for the rest of their lives. So make sure the lessons that you're sharing with them and the interactions that you are having with them are things that you want to have a positive impact for eternity, basically, unless they, want to change it.
Going back to the earlier discussion that it's necessary to teach children how to think is, go back to the reading of the books again. So it's all of us have 20 books, children's books laying around our house. I mean, they do. And now, obviously, I want everybody to buy my book, but there's 100 other great books out there. So, they're out there. So if you're a grandparent or parent and it's time for the kid to read his book, and reading books should be part of your routine. It should be take a bath, read a book, before you go to bed. But if you're part of that, let the child pick out the book initially. So let them pick out the book that they want to read. They jump on your lap, they bring you the book. And before you even read the book, you want to ask them, what do you think will happen in this book? Okay, again, we're trying to get them to think. What do you think is going to happen? So they should be at 2, 3, 4, 5 before they even open the book. Think about what's going to happen in the book. I mean, that you think about that goes on in life when you're 40, 50. You got to think about those things before things happen. So then once you open up the book and you're reading the books to them, ask them, who are the characters in this book? Where is the setting, so that they can get really involved understanding of how to learn how to think. Does anything in this book sound familiar to you when you're reading to the child? Do you have friends like this? Does it look like your neighborhood? And then, we should always be asking question at the end, much like when we're having dinner with them at night, how was your day, is, what was your favorite part of this book and why? So if we continue to ask them these questions, they're going to start to be thinking too. And like you said, we do it consistently when they're young, it's going to pay off for us.
Yeah.
Great point. So what do your grandkids think of the book? What was their reaction when you first introduced the book to them?
Well, it was interesting. They were all here about a month ago, and Olivia grabbed the book and grabbed 3 of the kids, and for some reason ran underneath my desk. They didn't know I was around the corner, and she started reading the book to them. And Jackson says, that's me in the bathtub. And Levi says, that's me with my sea monsters. So they were very involved into it. So I think they'll probably appreciate it when they're older. But they feel like they're part of it now.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, and one thing, this memory just flashed in my head, talking about the recording that and the technology that folks have access to now as kids. Just recording this session right now. Imagine 2-3 generations from now, kids, grandkids, great grandkids, great grandkids that you may never meet will be able to watch this and get a little bit of intel about who you were and how you contributed to their creation ultimately. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, it's interesting you're talking about generations. One of the things that I've noticed has changed over generations is discipline. Okay, I don't know how you guys were disciplined when you were growing up, but it's completely different than the way my kids discipline their kids today. When I was growing up, and we were, again, I'm a baby boomer, so my parents were part of that greatest generation that really got us in democracy. I grew up in the 40s, the 50s and 60s. And so, my parents went through the recession. So they had to live through the recession. They're the ones who fought World War II. So they were able to do that. They came back. It was a great, wonderful generation, but they were very disciplined because of everything they had gone through. So when I was growing up, my brother Larry and we got in trouble. My mother would say, wait till your dad gets home. So he'd come home, he'd whip off his belt, and he would chase us around the kitchen table. He also had a fraternity paddle, and so he'd use that too. So one fall night when they were out of the house, we lived up in Ohio, and the leaves were on the ground, and so we grabbed his paddle and we stuck it under the leaves, and then it snowed the next night, and that spring the paddle disappeared. It was like a miracle as far as I'm concerned, but that was discipline when we were growing up. Now, I didn't chase my kids around the kitchen table with belts. We talked to them. We gave them a little bit different. And then in today's world, I'm seeing that my grandkids are disciplined by their kids. They go to timeout. They go in the corner. They got to be by themselves. They got to, it's tough for them because they're taken away from the group. It's a great way to be disciplined. So, you're talking about legacies and what's going to happen in generations. I was just thinking how that has changed over the last 3 generations.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting topic. And, I don't have a whole lot of experience. I was a very behaved child. And,
oh, wow.
I didn't get in trouble. And Kevin knows that's BS. And my parents are probably going to be listening to this and going, that's BS. I had the same experience, wait till your dad gets home, or, my grandmother would threaten me with a razor strop, or they'd make, I love the old, go out and cut a switch and don't come back with a lame one, right? I mean, you better come back with a switch that's got some pop to it, a good stout one. Otherwise they're going to go cut it themselves. And, my grandparents, they fired me up a time or two, and I needed it, And I think that, again, that's a whole nother discussion, but I think some of the problems we experience today are because that discipline has changed, and we're to blame.
Yeah, and I think that probably the key word in all that is the word discipline, because discipline can be carried out in any number of different ways. Part of it, I believe, is personality driven. I mean, my daughter, she was spanked when she was small, but not a lot. And part of the reason she wasn't spanked a lot is because she didn't need it. She was, all I had to do was look at her in a certain way, and she became compliant instantly. And then she would punish herself because that was part of her personality. Other kids are different. That wouldn't have worked with me as a kid.
Right.
My dad and mom could look at me all day long, and that would have no impact as long as they weren't swinging at me. So I think part of it is personality driven, but you're right.
I'm thinking about my daughters, man, and they were like that, right? So, but it was completely opposites,
right.
And you probably wouldn't pick the one that was responsible for one behavior versus the other either. But one of them, you just look at her, raise your voice, and she was, just mortified,
right?
And the other one, she'd buck right back at you. Right.
There you go.
You want to go toe to toe? All right, let's have some.
Right.
And that was challenging.
Yeah.
But I've said this to many other people that I hear people talk about the horrors of teenagers and that the grandchildren are your reward for not killing your teenagers. I never had the desire to kill my teenagers. I feel blessed. My wife and I have talked about that they were actually pretty well behaved. Yeah. And I don't think that happened by osmosis, right? I think it was the relationship that we had with them and the foundation that was built along the way. But I think some spanking certainly doesn't hurt.
So Gramps, I have another question I want you to dig into a little bit. You've had a very interesting and diverse career. I mean, you've been an entrepreneur who has stuck your foot into a number of different ponds over the years. And somehow at this point in your life, you've settled on this important topic of using your wisdom of the ages to pass on to your grandkids and potentially thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of other grandkids through writing a book. How does that happen? What's going on in your head that makes you want to settle there? Maybe not settle, but contribute is a better word.
That's a great question.
Throughout our lives, we have different goals. When I was younger, my goal was go, build a business, make money, don't take any prisoners and make something different, influence other people's lives along the way. And so, once what I found, at least in my life, is that when I accomplish something, so in other words, I've been an entrepreneur. I've started a couple companies. One of them I took public. But once I got that done, it was like, okay, what's next? And so it was like, this kind of just evolved for me. It was like, all right, we're getting older, and let's not kid ourselves. We as a generation are dying faster than any other generation because of COVID. When you think of that, people that are 65 and older are 16% of the population, but they're 75% of the COVID deaths. We're losing our contemporaries right and left. It may help for Social Security down the road, but we're losing a lot of people. And so we've got to be able to jump in right now and make a difference. We have to be able to say, okay, I'm getting older, so what? How can I influence? What can I do to make a difference in other people's lives? And so that's how I got involved in doing this.
Okay, that's
an outstanding why.
That's a noble cause.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Deciding to step up and get it done. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So Gramps, how can people find your book and find out more about you if they're interested?
Oh, sure. You can go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or about 100 other sites out there. Just go, I don't want to turn 3, or you can come to my site, which is grampsjeffrey.com. Or if any of your listeners want to continue this conversation, I'd love to talk with them. And my email is grampsjeffrey@gmail.com. So that's how you can find it.
Very cool.
And what is for those who haven't read the book, which is going to be a whole bunch of people listening to this, what is the basic premises? What is it about this child that is portrayed in the book that says, I don't want to turn 3? What's that about?
It's about, what age do you take responsibility? At what age do you decide the difference between me and us? Yeah, and what's great about this, because this was a true story. The book is, I don't know if you've seen the book, but it's I don't want to turn 3. And it's based on really what happened with my 6 grandkids. All the pictures are pictures that I took and sent them to the illustrator for her to make them a cartoonish kind of look. but that's an actual picture of the two kids in the bathtub.
That's awesome.
And
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
so it's a true story. And so the beauty of the story is, the father is the hero in this book. The father is the one, and most of the time it's the mother. So here we got three fathers here. We're the hero in this book. The father's the hero in this book. He gets everybody together, and then the solution comes from the oldest grandchild, who talks all the kids into giving all of their toys to the homeless kids downtown. And so that's how it ends up. And that's how it really happened. Olivia was telling about how they're having a drive to have all the homeless kids downtown. So that's why it's a fun book, because it's a true story, but it can happen in any family.
There you go. That, to me, that makes the book even more interesting, to know that, it's a real world event in your life that you were able to turn into a teaching moment for, like, as many people are going to read the book. So that's awesome. Well done on that one.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Certainly adds value. Yeah, and again, something that they'll look back on fondly when they're, reading it to their children one day.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if they'll ever read my business book. My business book is called the Secrets of Retailing: How to Be Walmart. And I wrote that a few years ago. But if they read the kids' book, that's okay.
Well, they can start with the kids' book and then graduate into the more business-related book, right?
Right.
Knowing the secrets of retailing, I'm sure, is an awesome habit, awesome, body of knowledge to master over time if you choose to go in that direction. I'm sure that's a good one.
Yeah, the reason I wrote that book is, this is the company that I took public, is we became the premier business-to-business site on the internet, where we sold in case quantity to small businesses all around the world. Our customers were the moms and the pops who are surviving and thriving against the chains. So what happened was getting all these phone calls from our customers. How do you do that? How do you do this? So the book is a 15-chapter book, step-by-step guide on how to open a business, how to run a business. So, there's chapters on how to hire people, how to find location, where do you find your products, how do you market online, how do you market traditionally, and the last chapter is how do you exit your business. So that's what that book's all about.
And does the business still exist as a publicly traded company?
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And will you say the name of it, or can you not?
No, we're here to talk about the children's book.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, now you're going to have to do your investigating, Kevin.
I have to figure that one out.
We will find it. We will not be defeated.
I don't know. It's probably out there somewhere. It's publicly traded now, right? So
Yeah.
at some point.
Well, that's cool, man. I've certainly enjoyed the conversation. The book is out there for folks to get, and I would encourage you to check it out and sit down and take time to read it to your kids, read it to your grandkids. Spend that quality time with them. It's invaluable.
Yeah, and I like the idea that you ask your grandchildren questions about the book that make them think. That's pretty neat as well. I mean, I think some of that happens just naturally, organically, but if you go into it with the predisposition to handle it that way, I think it's even more valuable time. So I like that advice.
As long as we're talking about questions, think about this one question, that if we would all ask these little kids how it could probably change our world. And that question is, what did you do today that was nice to someone else? Okay? And the reason I say that is, in the book, the kids are fighting over the dinosaurs, they're fighting over the trucks, they're fighting over everything. But it ends up that they start to share. So can you imagine if we asked our kids today, what did you do today that was nice to someone else? The first time you ask that to your child, they're gonna look at you like, what are you talking about? But after 4 or 5 days, they're gonna say, I need to impress mom and dad. I'm gonna do something nice for somebody else. Whether it's opening a door, or walking a lady across the street, or sharing your trucks with your cousin. So that's all part of the questioning that we as adults need to get ingrained into these kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll certainly change their focus. They'll, to your point, they'll start looking for ways to check that box, and then they'll feel the goodness of doing so. And it'll be a cycle that just helps to repeat itself.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, the habit of doing that. Habit creates destiny. You put the right habits in place and repeat them over and over again. And next thing you know, you wake up and you've become that. And so it's a great way to go for sure.
Right.
Well, thank you. This has been wonderful. I have appreciated the time, and you've given me some things to think about, and I've enjoyed it very much.
Yeah. And in the meantime, Kevin, I know you don't have grandchildren to read to, but I'd be happy to sit down and you can read to me.
Okay.
I'll let you check that box.
Can I sit on your lap?
No, but we're close enough.
Very good.
Yeah. No, seriously, Gramps, man, thank you for your time and your willingness to come on here and talk about it. And man, I had a chance to read it, and like I said, I'd encourage folks out there to get a copy and share it with others. So thank you again.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
All right, so Kevin just gave me the official nod over here because he thought I was going to forget it this time, because I have a tendency of forgetting to push this button over here.
Tendency is not the right word. Track record is the right word.
Yeah. There is that. All right. So I'm supposed to also say something like this. No matter who you are, where you are, what you're doing, make sure between this podcast and the next, you take time to read to your children or grandchildren and
Thank you for listening to this
I
Enjoy
messed
the
that
ride.
up. Enjoy the
That's
ride.
good. Enjoy the ride.
You'll receive
It's all
notifications
good.
when new episodes are available. To learn more about the Graybeards, visit their website, graybeardchronicles.com.
Tried to squeeze too much in there.
You did.
That's all right.
That's all right. It's all good.